Hello. Our story begins inside the reactor room of the Palace of Theed. Qui-Gon Jinn was currently engaging with Darth Maul for the second time. Their blades passed back and forth, and it was starting to become clear to Qui-Gon that he likely wouldn't come out on top of this fight. He was talented, but not like his own master. He was starting to slow down, too. Obi-Wan was somewhere behind him, but he didn't know where. Qui-Gon pressed his assault forward, allowing his blade to direct where he wanted this fight to go. Not a word had been said during this entire duration of the fight. Qui-Gon never even heard Maul's voice. There was no communication between them, but maybe there could be some type of anything. As they fought, the ray shields began to close, and the two opponents became separated. Qui-Gon, without missing a beat, got down onto his knees and closed his eyes. He found peace through the Force, but he was using the Force to understand his opponent in a way he hadn't yet. Maul paced back and forth, rage filling his eyes, with strength ready to strike. Qui-Gon could feel all of Maul's insecurities in the moment. The young Zabrak man was isolated from everyone, raised into torture and forced to endure struggles that most sentients wouldn't ever see. Qui-Gon couldn't make the connection back to Mother Thousand, but that didn't matter. She never got to be around her child, and Maul was raised by darkness into darkness. Maul was confident until Qui-Gon spoke up, his voice reverberating through the shield, as he told the young Sith that it wasn't his fault. This felt like a trick, so Maul raised his barriers. The Jedi Master continued to express that he wasn't at fault for becoming a Sith. All the torture he endured, his pain, it wasn't his burden to bear. Maul stepped back with a bit of hesitation, and then the ray shields opened. He prepared for an attack, to which Qui-Gon jumped to his feet, just as Maul jumped back. Qui-Gon stayed put. Obi-Wan caught up to his master, and Maul prepared to strike at him, and then the ray shields closed again. His blade struck the shield, and his arms were thrown backwards. Qui-Gon put his hand out in front of Obi-Wan to help him ease into the situation. Maybe Qui-Gon was wrong for doing so, and maybe it was ignorant of him to ignore the past. But the light was stronger. The light couldn't be stopped, and in his own belief, it wouldn't be fully worth it to kill the Zabrak man. Surely there was some type of light within him that could be utilized. It wasn't about turning Maul for the destruction of the Sith. It was about turning Maul because, as a Jedi, killing was a last resort. Qui-Gon eternally understood that by this point, he should have thrown out the potential for saving Maul. But having had a moment to feel into his soul, he knew that he couldn't just neglect the suffering that he was enduring. Qui-Gon came back to reality, only a moment having passed since his arm was raised before Obi-Wan's chest, and he told the Zabrak warrior that he could have a life of fullness. Maul retaliated, his voice being heard for the first time since any of their interactions. He told the Jedi that he wouldn't fall for the deception. The Jedi were true evil, their religion was toxic, and their complacency would cost them everything they had built. Qui-Gon nodded his head, suggesting that there were issues with the Jedi, but that did not make them impure. Sentients make mistakes. The Sith only desire power. Maul might believe that this is what he wished for, but he might not actually want it when he got it. Qui-Gon extended a hand forward towards the ray shield, and told Maul that he didn't have to become a Jedi, but he just wanted to help. There was no need for him to suffer anymore. The shields opened and he stalled for a moment, and then swung forward. Obi-Wan stepped forward in front of his master and blocked the strike from Maul. The Sith assassin looked at the unbroken demeanor coming from the Jedi Master. Obi-Wan obviously was working quickly to save Qui-Gon's life, but he couldn't help but notice how tranquil his master was being. It honestly didn't make much sense. Obi-Wan pressed forward and pushed Maul back a little, before Qui-Gon's hand pulled him back into the shield as he stepped out. The shield lifted up, and Qui-Gon stared Maul down. The Sith spun his lightsaber and told him that he should have helped his student. Obi-Wan got upset as he tried to get free from the shield, but he couldn't. Qui-Gon kept his eye on Maul, but gave himself some more distance to work with. Qui-Gon continued speaking the same way he had before, telling Maul that he had so much more to live for, as he tried to give Maul what it seemed like he was longing for. Qui-Gon didn't really get much from Maul when he felt through him, but what he got was isolation, of fear, pain, and suffering. The isolation stuck out the most, so he focused on it, pulling at Maul's heartstrings because no one is truly evil. Obviously, Qui-Gon hadn't met Sidious, but he believed that Maul could actually be evil. He had so much potential, and if he let it slip down this dark path, then he would lose his own true ceiling. Qui-Gon asked what Maul longed for, whether it be family, brotherhood, companionship, or perhaps something as simple as compassion. Maul swung, and Qui-Gon ignited his blade and defended the strike. He told Maul that his efforts would only continue to be in vain unless he understood what awaited him down the path of darkness. Deception would torment him, lies would fuel him to be angry at the wrong people, Heartlessness would drive him to insanity, and even if he could defeat his master, what would he have? He didn't need to be a Jedi to be treated like a living being. Maul swung again, a couple parries and a miss, before Qui-Gon threw his blade forward and pushed a weak-hearted Maul off his feet. The Sith assassin staggered, and he looked up. Qui-Gon could have killed him in this moment. His blade and speed were perfectly aligned to leave the killing blow. Maul watched the shield open behind him as Obi-Wan stood paralyzed by the efforts made by his master. Despite their disagreements as master and apprentice, and their struggles with each other, this was a true Jedi doing the work of the Force. Maul looked over to Qui-Gon and asked how he could escape the Sith. Sidious would hunt him down and kill him. Qui-Gon then suggested that they could stop the Dark Lord together. Maul hated the idea of being involved with the Jedi though. He didn't trust much of anything, nothing aside from the abuse, so the first touch of sincere security felt like a relief, but he continued pulling back. Maul spoke aloud, telling them that this was wrong. He was a Zabrak, a warrior, a Dathomirian. He was strong. Qui-Gon put his hand up and confirmed what Maul said. He said that Maul was a Zabrak. He was a warrior, a Dathomirian, and he was strong. But he was not a Sith. Maul's lightsaber slipped from his grip as it slammed into the ground. He realized that at the end of all of it, he considered himself a multitude of other things before ever identifying with the Sith. Sure, at the end of that list he was a Sith, but at the forefront of it was everything he believed himself to be, something that within his own mind he built up as the only reward for his punishment, because his torment made him more of a powerful Zabrak. His imprisonment forged him into a dynamic warrior, his suffering transformed him into a dominant Dathomirian, and because of all of that, he was strong. Maybe he never had the introspective to see it within himself, but with someone pushing him to see it, he finally understood. Both Jedi still kept their distance. It was clear he was treated like an animal. The abuse radiated off of his trembling fingertips, because after all of his self-realizations due to the Jedi, he still had the thought and fear of confronting Sidious. The name alone sent chills down his spine. The thought of his eerie voice, yellow eyes, and wicked essence pushed him back into his shell. Qui-Gon could see it, so he inched forward and prodded gently, telling Maul they could keep him safe. Maul snapped back. There was no safety. Sidious would go to the ends of the universe to make you suffer for betraying him, let alone failing. Maul couldn't fail. He couldn't leave. He couldn't escape. But it was already apparent to Qui-Gon that Maul's mind had been made up. The trauma bond was keeping him cemented into Palpatine's heel. Master Qui-Gon expressed that he knew it was unnerving, treading lightly as he stepped forward. But despite him not knowing him or understanding him or being like him, he could be empathetic to his suffering. He could be sympathetic to his struggles, because that wasn't just being a good Jedi, but a good individual. Their lives differed entirely, but Qui-Gon told Maul that he was willing to try. As it turns out, being willing to try and listen is all it takes to even understand the most surface-level pain, let alone what was held within. Maul's silence was broken by him asking Qui-Gon to guide him. The Jedi Master smiled and nodded his head, telling Maul that he wouldn't lead him astray. It was a very surprising turn of events in Obi-Wan's mind, but he was willing to follow along and see what happened. Qui-Gon didn't really have a plan in mind, but revealing Maul to the Jedi wasn't something he considered doing. He knew it would force Maul back into his shell, one that he was much more comfortable with than this. But the first step to genuine change requires making the comfortable uncomfortable. Nothing worth changing will ever be comfortable, and Qui-Gon knew that. This process would be especially difficult for Maul, but he had faith. As they left the reactor, Qui-Gon asked Maul if he'd be okay going with Obi-Wan. He had an idea. He requested that Maul take his vessel, remove the tracker or anything else attached to it, and then head to the planet of Tython. Maul looked at Kenobi and then to Qui-Gon and asked why. It was explained that Qui-Gon needed to be here to make sure everything went soundly for the Council, which would surely be once the battle was concluded. It'd be best to keep Maul safe in the situation. Qui-Gon would just need to make an excuse for why Obi-Wan wasn't present. Maul and Obi-Wan took the vessel and left the world. The only instruction Obi-Wan was given was to simply be supportive. There was no reason for a divide to be manufactured out of nowhere. The bond between Kenobi and Maul would be important until Qui-Gon could get back to Tython. Obi-Wan understood this, but it didn't make their dynamic any easier. Maul was quiet as it was, so Obi-Wan had to fill in those huge gaps of awkward silences. Their conversations were stale by Obi-Wan's standards, but truthfully, they worked. It genuinely surprised Maul that there was someone interested in him. He didn't have to share much, but what he did share was more or less about his own experiences with Sidious. Obi-Wan, being so young, forgot about his eagerness to find Sidious and destroy the Sith, and so he became interested in the stories that Maul would tell him under a quiet hum in his voice. Maul was so soft-spoken, and it had everything to do with his upbringing. He wasn't used to talking, so he spoke quietly and methodically, the way he would when he spoke to himself alone to pass the hours at night. Obi-Wan couldn't believe that it was possible for someone to be treated the way Maul had been treated. When Maul asked Obi-Wan about himself, it was hard. How could he follow up what Maul said to him by telling him about his own life? But they could find relation in certain aspects of their own stories. The trip through hyperspace was long, but it passed by with relative ease, and then when they arrived, they went to the coordinates Qui-Gon gave them. It was a henge on a mountaintop with a seeing stone in the middle. Obi-Wan knew the stone would help the Jedi find other Force users, but it had other uses that Qui-Gon was much more privy to than Kenobi or Maul. The Battle of Naboo was a victory for the people of Naboo. However, its causation was a direct loss for the Republic. A future war was looming on the horizon because of Palpatine. It'd be 10 years until Sidious could bring his plan to fruition. Qui-Gon did what he needed to do. He appeased the Council and informed them of his motives to promote Obi-Wan to knighthood and then take Anakin Skywalker as a student. Because, what other 9-year-old boys can blow up a Trade Federation battleship during their first time flying a spaceship? However, despite the actions Anakin made during the battle, they weren't fully convinced. A decision would be made upon the return to Coruscant. As for the Sith, Qui-Gon said that an engagement did happen, but the Sith was killed during the fight, his remains falling down the reactor shaft outside the hangar bay. The question came up about Obi-Wan, and Qui-Gon suggested that he was with the Gungans before returning to Coruscant. The Council bought the shabby story, and the celebrations began. Qui-Gon and Anakin would accompany the Council back to Coruscant after Palpatine said he'd watch Anakin's career with great interest. Truthfully, Qui-Gon thought this was a bit odd, but he didn't read into it too much. His main priorities were making sure Anakin could be trained and helping Maul. He felt optimistic, and Obi-Wan was communicating with him consistently, because on Tython, the bond between Kenobi and Maul was very surface level. The two of them just continued talking with each other, keeping each other awake until Qui-Gon got to the location. Though Maul was the first out of the two of them to fall asleep, it was the first rest he'd actually had with genuine peace. Obi-Wan didn't trust the Sith, so he forced himself to stay awake throughout the night. But Maul at this point in his life had no real reason to do anything to Obi-Wan. He could technically kill him and take his blade back to Palpatine, but upon waking up, he considered what would happen if he did return to his master. Qui-Gon told Maul of his plan, and Maul agreed to it, so he couldn't just go home after dying. When Maul woke up, he could see that Kenobi was awake, but Obi-Wan didn't notice Maul was awake as well. Obi-Wan was fading in and out of sleep, so he wasn't actually present. Maul felt calmness and peace for the first time in his life. It was genuinely relaxing and he didn't know how to comprehend it. What was he feeling? It was just so surreal. He thought back on his life as a slave, and he started to really internalize what it would be like, being able to have freedom from the dark side. It was so powerful, alluring, and truthfully strengthening, but for the first time ever he realized that strength wasn't just in power, it was in something else. He didn't have a word for it, but the word would have been strength and vulnerability. Inside the Jedi Temple, Anakin was brought before the Council of 11. Qui-Gon may have not died, but Yaddle still was outraged over the knowledge that the Sith had returned. She believed Dooku was right, and she was eager to meet him at a halfway point, to perhaps help him through his newest endeavors. She wasn't sure what would come next, but she believed that she could be of assistance to Dooku in his own journey. Regardless, the Council, especially without Yaddle, was even less likely to accept Anakin into their ranks. Qui-Gon was adamant on training him, but they denied his request and Skywalker to be sent back to Tatooine. This burdened Qui-Gon more than anything he could ever think of, but he knew that that was a very truthful reality of the Jedi. Their complacency had bought them a fraudulent balance. Master Jinn had no intentions of leaving the Order or forsaking it, because despite their many flaws, he was able to see past those flaws. He may have had some grievances with the Jedi and especially their council, but they were still the good guys. Qui-Gon went to the light because it was there. That was the same when it came to his perception of the Jedi. It was alright. Qui-Gon had alternative methods for training the boy. With Obi-Wan becoming a knight, both he and Qui-Gon would be free to leave the planet whenever they wanted. So with the news being given to them, Qui-Gon and Anakin would go to Tython. Inversely, instead of leaving the Jedi Temple for the works, Dooku stood in silence outside the Tree of Life inside the temple garden. Master Yaddle found him and confronted him, expressing that she admitted how wrong she and the Council were. There was a darkness growing, and she didn't want it to consume the galaxy. Dooku knew the truth, and he was close to falling, but his thoughts remained on Qui-Gon. The boy he trained, now a man, meant the galaxy to him. He loved his student, and he couldn't imagine what his student might do if he left the Order. With news of Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan having killed Maul being what he heard, he believed that perhaps the Sith were just meant to die once again. He knew everything about the clones, Sidious, and the Sith plan, but he wouldn't tell Yaddle. Not yet. He had to make up his mind first. But how much further down the dark path could one person go? He helped kill his best friend and locked up Silman with the pikes on Obadiah. He couldn't do it again, and he couldn't even imagine the thought of betraying Yaddle. So he agreed to begin an investigation with her. She might see his line of thoughts, or he might be swayed back to the Jedi way. Time would tell. When Qui Gon arrived on Tython, he could see Obi-Wan was tired, and he ushered him off to get some actual sleep. He then introduced Anakin to the young man, who almost ran him over. Maul didn't actually mean to almost run him over. He just couldn't see that there was someone in front of him because of sand being everywhere. Anakin could relate to that. He didn't know how to apologize, and Qui-Gon explained the situation to Skywalker before getting the Tython anyways. Anakin wasn't too fazed by this. Qui-Gon had his hands full, but they would become even more full in a couple of days. He requested Obi-Wan to Tatooine to free Shmi Skywalker with some credits he had transferred to the kind the Toydarian man accepted in Mos Espa. Kenobi went and did as his master asked. Qui-Gon's days on Tython were filled, but he preferred the wilderness of Tython, because the Force was much more still and peaceful than it was on Coruscant. This was a suggestion he made to the Council about training younglings in the past. All the noise inside the temple could be very bothersome to people learning for the first time, which is what both Skywalker and Maul were doing. Qui-Gon worked with Maul more than he did Anakin, which both of them were okay with. Master Jinn was teaching two former slaves how to forgive those who wronged them, but also grow them beyond what their rage could withhold them from. Some days were harder than others. Some days Maul wanted to run back to Palpatine in an abusive relationship, but every day Qui-Gon reminded them of the same message, one that he at a young age made for himself. It was so simple, but it was a characteristic change to one's mindset, necessary for creating the life one desires. It was simple. Be better than you were yesterday. This didn't mean do more Jedi exercises or meditate more. It didn't mean destroy yourself on a grind one day and the next day rest all day. It simply meant have the mindset that no matter what happens in the planetary rotation of one day, one will be the best version of himself for 24 hours. Learn something new, feel something different, perceive another thing through a different lens. It didn't matter how it was done. Just make sure that you were better than you were the day before. It was the crux of both lessons being taught. The lessons of healing and forgiveness in comparison to learning from scratch and becoming dedicated. Obi-Wan did bring Shmi back to Tython, but it was a bit cramped. Everyone did a good job with being around each other. It was just a lot of people for a small space. Obi-Wan wasn't staying on Tython a whole lot. He was excited to become a Jedi Master, so he was going back to Coruscant to find a Padawan, but he never found one. Instead, he'd bring supplies back for Qui-Gon. What Master Jinn did throughout each day was done in cycles. He'd start the day off with Maul, who was handling this recovery really well. Qui-Gon became almost fatherly to him, which no one ever thought would happen. It would start out by the Seeing Stone inside the henge and meditate. The stone could be used for reaching out to others through the Force, but it could also be used as a central place of balance and harmony. The Force was very vibrant, so they would meditate together and speak out their past to the other. It was very basic and it wasn't very difficult, but the process of being comfortable being vulnerable and having the courage to be gentle was almost like giving Maul a brand new life. He felt like he could breathe, and he became invested in stories Qui-Gon had to tell. When the sun came up, Qui-Gon would go down from the henge and begin Anakin's training. It would revolve around building up his skills and harnessing his determination. Skywalker knew he was special, and he understood that he had a high midi whatever they called it. So, he figured he wouldn't have to do any hard work. But Qui-Gon broke that out of him immediately. He wasn't going to have a student that didn't know how to be a Force user. Anakin was putting himself down by not taking his training seriously, or as seriously if you will. Qui-Gon understood that if Skywalker continued to belittle how important training was, then he would throw away his massive potential. It wasn't about power or strength, but it was so important for him to realize that the Force was a gift. To be able to use it the way they were able to, at a start, was something that many people wouldn't ever get to. They obviously could train themselves to get to a certain level, but to have such an opportunity was not to be wasted. The paternity that Qui-Gon radiated helped both Anakin and Maul. The days continued with a mix-up of sessions between the two. Qui-Gon was under a lot of stress during this period, and he had pretty much cut himself off from the Jedi Order. The Council didn't notice, and Dooku was beginning to wonder where his former student went. But he was reigniting his passion for the Jedi. Dooku was in communication with Sidious, who was becoming more and more impatient with Dooku's behavior. The Jedi Master was struggling. He set forward a plan Sidious wanted enacted. He just hadn't joined his new master fully, not having left the Order. All the while, he was consistently trying to make sure it was clear he hadn't betrayed Sidious, because truthfully, he hadn't. But being the Dark Lord couldn't ever assume anything, he was prepared for Dooku to betray him, and so he set into motion new plans. He needed someone else to work with him, or work for him, and so he scoured connections he had. All it took was a matter of time until he found the right one. At the same time, Obi-Wan became a Jedi Master to his first student. She was one of the older girls in her class, one not selected by a master, and the last one of her class to actually become a Padawan. He figured that someone so similar to him would make a good match for each other. Their pairing would be very solid, and while Obi-Wan made sure Qui-Gon got shipments from Coruscant, he was a little tied up at the moment. Master Quinlan Vos was brought into this operation, as was Jedi Master Kit Fisto, both of which were much more easygoing than most Jedi, so their involvement was optimistic for Qui-Gon. Aayla Secure would also eventually become a part of this little circle. The whole point of their involvement was just to make sure the group on Tython had enough supplies. Maul and Anakin did get to interact with Kit Fisto, Quinlan, and Aayla, but they were very limited interactions. Qui-Gon's focus on the two learners of the Force allowed them to blossom. Maul's lightsaber was losing its crimson haze, and Anakin hadn't been introduced into finding his Kyber crystal. At a certain point, Dooku would have the opportunity to find Qui-Gon after finally meeting Obi-Wan and his new Padawan inside the temple. Dooku was always fond of his student, but he was especially proud of what Qui-Gon had done. It made him realize his own mistakes regarding the Jedi Order and his initial desire to leave. He realized that it wasn't what the Order made of him, it's what he made of the Order he represented. If he wanted to be just like them, then he would damn them to obscurity. If not, then he could be just like his former student and help others. As a Jedi, he had the chance to change things for the better. Obviously, he was conflicted. The Sith were under the radar, and he could take advantage of it. But that didn't align with who he was. Then again, he already got his best friend killed, so instead of just telling the Jedi where it was or where Sidious was, he went on a number of journeys with Yaddle until they were discovered by Sidious. This was unintentional. They weren't even on the right track, but Sidious forced Dooku to join him or the Jedi. Dooku hesitated, and Yaddle was confused. It only became clear when Sidious thrusted his lightsaber through an unsuspecting Dooku's chest, before engaging Yaddle and killing her too. Sidious knew he would struggle in a duel with Dooku, so killing him early made everything easier for him to deal with. Now that Dooku was out of the way, he would need to enact the second part of his plan. Dooku and Yaddle would be found hours later, being that Obi-Wan and his Padawan were on the same planet. They just happened to find the body when they were looking for the two masters. It was obviously problematic, but the Sith Lord escaped. Instead of it doing anything productive, it forced the Jedi Order to grind to a halt. Yoda became paranoid, and so did the Council, and naturally, the entire situation blew out of proportion. Their belief is that the Sith Lord fought both Dooku and Yaddle at the same time and killed them both. Sidious was talented, but not even he would have been able to pull that off, especially not against the likes of Dooku. Qui-Gon's revelation to the death of both masters was soul-crushing. It made him deeply regret his actions. Not that he wished he could take it back, just that he could have at least said goodbye to Dooku. Qui-Gon swapped places with Obi-Wan and his student, so that Qui-Gon could be there for the funeral. When he returned, Maul really understood and conceptualized what the Sith did to others. It had been months since Qui-Gon took him under his wing, and when he finally saw his new teacher's face upon his return to Tython, it broke something that hadn't ever been broken within Maul's heart. His life had been pain and misery, and he never actually got the chance to build a connection with someone. So when he did, and that someone was hurt, he wanted to hurt who did that to his teacher, and Sidious was responsible. Qui-Gon was a good person, and he did not deserve that, though the trauma was still apparent. After all of his hard work and dedication to releasing the darkness, Maul still feared his former master, but he would break free from those chains. Instead of giving in, he committed himself to someone who committed to him. Maul informed Qui-Gon that he knew where to find Sidious. Qui-Gon honestly believed that Maul would tell him at one point or another. He, of course, wanted the Sith destroyed, but he wasn't going to force someone to tell him that information. It wasn't until Dooku was killed that he actually considered forcing it from Maul's mouth, but he still couldn't do that. Maul was actually happy. His lightsaber had faded into a light blue, and he wore a smile on his face consistently, being a better version of himself than he was the day before. So when Maul told him, he was in a way surprised, but he was accepting, understanding, and informed his student that he would make sure it was dealt with. Qui-Gon went to the Council and informed his peers that he had intel on who the Sith Lord was. All their operations in layers, all of them that were known to Maul. The Jedi asked how, and Qui-Gon came clean, expressing that he saved the Sith from Naboo, giving him a second chance at life and the light. The Council was repulsed by this, even one or two believing that Qui Gon was conspiring with the Sith. But he made sure that such accusations were put to rest. He expressed with the sincerest tone that he did what he did on Naboo to be more of a Jedi than not. If he killed an individual stolen from his home without ever having been given the chance to have his own life, then he'd be doing a disservice to their code, to the Jedi way. He told them that he would not reveal the location of Maul, but his words could help the Jedi bring balance to the Force. The Council was obviously taken aback, but how could they not take up the offer? So they listened to Qui-Gon's words, and they sent the entire collective group out to find Sidious. Since there were now 12 of them, Yaddle Spot having been replaced in the previous couple months, they went out for the hunt of the Sith. Qui-Gon returned the Tython to find Maul in shambles. As his former master was hunted down and killed by the Jedi Council, Maul feared that Sidious would come for him. He believed that Qui-Gon had died in the process of informing the Council, for whatever reason, and he feared the idea of coming into contact with Sidious once more. This fear wasn't a negative reflection of his strength as a warrior, rather a mirror to the type of influence and power Sidious had over those he manipulated and controlled. The Dark Lord made sure the trauma bond was deep, and with that deep wound still healing, flare-ups could happen. This was that. Had Maul not had Qui-Gon or been left alone, for example, he would have driven himself into madness, carrying on about having been lost on his path, rambling about the Jedi and the Sith and a plan that he had no knowledge of. The toxicity of the Sith etched its way into his heart, but when Qui-Gon returned, he brought comfort to his young student. Anakin wasn't affected by this. Maul's shutdown was internal, and he very quickly vacated from the area where Anakin was. The Council, after having lost a few of their members, including Ki-Adi-Mundi, Yarael Poof, Operancesis, Even Beale, and Eth Koth, would have to fill these roles. Because of Qui-Gon's resilience and strength in the Force, the Council once again offered him a seat on their council. He truthfully was unfazed by this request, not believing they'd be sincere of their request for him to join their ranks, but they were. So Qui-Gon had his own terms. He wished that they would allow Maul into the Order, not as an official member, and that they would also allow Anakin to be trained as a Jedi. The Council was very iffy about this, especially being a non-official member wasn't really a thing they did, but Qui-Gon explained that Maul would be beneficial. He was the last Sith, turned a Jedi. Their ancient rival in the Force wouldn't ever die through combat, so they would die through forgiveness, through what it meant to actually be a Jedi. The Council kind of saw his point, because, the Sith kind of returned after being killed through combat, so why not give this a try? But also, why wouldn't he be official? As Master Qui-Gon said, Maul was still learning to become whole. If they forced him into the Order to become a Jedi, he could go back inside of his shell and try and return to the Sith way. The idea was to allow Maul to become a Jedi under their guidance, and they would help him do so. If he wanted to search for any potential siblings, then they would support him. If they were Force sensitive, then they would support them as well. The Council was on its heels truthfully. They were nearly down half their members, and Qui-Gon was forcing them to play by his rules. Anakin's mother also would be provided residency within the city as well, considering they tried to send her son back to slavery on Tatooine. The Council eventually agreed. The most begrudging of the group was Yoda. For a master to hold the Council hostage felt outrageous and unfair, but perhaps there was a point to it. They accepted his request and it was fulfilled. Maul reluctantly joined the Jedi inside the temple. His skittish behavior was met with open arms as the Jedi welcomed him in. They were kind, caring, and despite their code forbidding attachments, very warm to him. Ayla, Kit, and Quinlan were already relatively familiar, and Obi-Wan was friendly alongside with his student, who was too. Maul's time as a non-official Jedi was really beneficiary. He spent time with people that were a lot like him, and became extremely close to them. The thing about Maul, that not even Qui-Gon knew, is that according to Sidious, he had a ceiling just as high as his own. So the Jedi welcomed in 2 members who could ensure a safe and secure order for years to come. With the revelation about Palpatine being a Sith Lord, the Jedi played everything close to the chest. They let the buzz roll over and allowed everything to dissipate. A new Chancellor came into office and they moved forward with regular business. Though with more unorthodox masters joining the ranks of the High Council, the Jedi began to mobilize outwards in an effort led by Qui-Gon Jinn and Quinlan Vos. Qui-Gon's work as a master elicited him so much more leeway to lead the Council and Order into new directions. He supported the expansion of the Jedi Order, but it would take them collectively being involved. Qui-Gon just wished his master could have seen what he was able to do. So sometimes Qui-Gon would wonder, what if Dooku joined the High Council? But Qui-Gon kept the ideals his master instilled into him alive, and he pushed for more incentive from the Jedi Order. Because he was so dedicated to helping people and even bringing peace to his new student, he was able to get a movement in the Senate to actually realize what their neglect had cost them in the Outer Rim. Qui-Gon's instruction of Anakin would be perfect. While both Anakin and Maul would see Qui-Gon like a father, he would accept his role and fulfill it as best as he could. After being inside the temple for a year, Maul and his BFF Obi-Wan Kenobi and his student would go to Dathomir to locate Maul's siblings. When they were found, he requested that they come with him to the Jedi Temple, but they were reluctant. Maul was a little disappointed, but with the comfort of his friend, he was able to find strength from the moment and understand that it was their choice, not his. Had they not been separated from birth, they likely would have been able to develop together as one united force, but that wasn't the case. Maul would become a Jedi Knight at the age of 29. It may have been the eldest age for any Jedi to become a Knight at, but he wore it as a badge of honor. Like Anakin, he could never truly let go of his attachments, but thanks to the teachings by Qui-Gon and his friendships and bonds from Ayla, Quinlan, Kit, and Obi-Wan, both Anakin and Maul would be able to find peace in their attachments and the new code they followed. Maul would be very instrumental in continuing Qui-Gon's relief efforts in the Outer Rim. It would take decades of work, treaties, revolutions, and rebuilding to get the Outer Rim to finally heal. But because of the Qui-Gon Jinn-led Jedi Council and Order, the people of the outer edge of the galaxy were able to find some level of happiness. As for the Jedi Order itself, it began to expand outwards. New outposts popped up, and the Jedi became more visible to the public. Instead of just their temple on Coruscant, they had 7 new locations. Both Maul and Anakin would become instructors at the same time, teaching their students alongside each other and inspiring both of their students to be the same way Qui-Gon taught them, just as the Jedi were under Qui-Gon's leadership, to be a better version of themselves today than they were yesterday. And that, my friends, is our story. Again, special thanks to Galvin Gaming, Tristan, Mandalore, Sir Willem 767, Darth Revan, Randy Bane, Sky Guy, Igor Simonov, Cullen Rooney, Shark Midori, RJ38, Nick, Michael Erlanger, The Last Jedi, Apollo Wee with 670, Annika Stank Runner, CT7567, Toaster Oven, Oz of Oz, Darth Nox, Eternal Padawan, Joshua Tam, Johnny Naguan, Sansa Skeleton, Jedi Sloth, Mr. Yeet Gamer, Lord Calig, Ginley Slayer 66, Mad Maddie Studios, Anakin 003, Lord Draken, Fortis Lexi Star Wars, Airbus, Rex the Wolf, the Many Thief First Names, Darksaint 46, Baron Joshua, and Lord Deadwing for supporting the channel. Smash the like button if you want to see more redemption and wholesome PP stories. Otherwise, go check out the Patreon. Sith Clone Wars is coming out this Saturday. Season finale to Season 2. Super stoked. You know what to do. Anyways, let's start the story. So the focus of the story, I really wanted to get into Maul's head. I thought that'd be the most interesting way to handle this story. I know there's not a whole lot of action, and that's kind of the point. The point is Maul's redemption, and Qui-Gon being the inspiration for such change to happen within someone who was literally raised as a slave, as this dark, obedient individual. And so I wanted to focus on that dynamic, which is Maul slowly coming out of his shell, learning how to be a better version of himself on the daily, and then learning how to be like a Jedi, and eventually becoming one because Qui-Gon became a master on the Council. And I think Maul would be inspired to become a Jedi due to his friendships with those 4 Jedi, but also because Qui-Gon became a master on the High Council. So anyways, I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all, spread the love, and always remember, my friends, may the Force be with you.